Ko ruapehu te maunga, ko takapu moana te moana, no Aotearoa ahu. Ai whanau mai ahoi I Kirikiriroa. Ai tipu ake aho I Tamaranui. Ko tamaki makaurau e nohu ana aho anaiane. Ko Ngātai Pakeha te iwi, ko Sean Harris, tēnei. Ruapehu is my mountain. The Hauraki Gulf is my sea. I am from New Zealand. I am born in Hamilton. I grew up in Tamaranui. I live in Auckland now. My people are Ngātai Pakeha. I am Sean. And I am here today to tell you a security tale. I've worked in information security predominantly in the financial space for the past 10 years in external or internal roles. And I was the Equifax Information Security Officer for New Zealand, pre-breach and post-breach. So, this talk covers the experience I had as working in that role, which is the equivalent of being a security consultant here in New Zealand. The time period covered in this particular talk is from August 2017 until 2019 when I left the business. I was not part of the technical IR. I'm in no way, shape or form able to talk about that. But what I can talk about are my experiences which I had in responding to the breach from here in New Zealand working with the global team. And if you're a customer of Equifax, you can be confident in them meeting your needs and them supplying what you need. I bear no ill will to my former employer, and this talk is purely educational. So, let's begin. So, in 2016, I joined Equifax. Equifax purchased Vida. Vida became Equifax. I was there for a year, and on 25th of August 2017, I traveled to Atlanta, Georgia to meet the global team. There was a week-long conference, amazing group of people. It's one of the best security teams I've worked in. This was the global information security officers, so consulting the business, non-operational, they're just there, compliance, all of that type of thing. I was there, had a fantastic week, jumped on a plane, came back, was ready to get involved in a whole bunch of different conversations and initiatives, when on the 8th of September, the breach announcement came. Now, as you can see, when I came back from Atlanta on the 3rd of September, no one in that team had been notified. That was a bit of a shock because when the announcement came on the Thursday night, US time, no one knew. I've heard stories from teams that they're at the pub and it popped up on the news that Equifax had a breach. And they found out by the pub lord coming over and saying, hey, you guys are from Equifax, right? I see your bags. What do you know about this breach? So that's how some of the teams found out. For me, what happened was I came into the office on the Friday, walked in past the GM of New Zealand's executive assistant, and she said, oh, so Sean, what do you know about the data breach? And I just go, okay, what data breach? I haven't seen anything. Sit down at my desk, and then the emails start. Then my boss, who lives in Sydney, contacted me and said, buckle in, something's going on, and off we went. So that's not the ideal way to find out about a security breach in any way, shape, or form. My first reaction on that was just total, utter shock and despair, because what do you do? There's been a breach, it's your parent company, you've got no idea what's going on, they're not telling you anything, you're just there in the middle trying to answer people's questions. Add to the fact that the New Zealand company knew that I was in Atlanta, and everyone started coming to me for answers, and I had to purely go, I don't know. So I get pulled into the GM's office, and the first thing you do in that situation is that you go, well, how secure are we? We've got our yearly assurance exercises where you get a reputable firm in to test everything. That happened 3 months ago, but you start doubting everything. And I'm forever thankful for the fact that the company that we use, I got on the phone, called up and said, hey, Sean here from Equifax. And they're able to pretty much give me a slot that Monday to help and just redo and test our entire web-facing environment. And for about 2 weeks after that, I'm just depressed. I don't know what's going on. I'm not getting any information. I've got a one-liner from HQ saying, "Hi, don't worry, you're not involved in the breach. Australia and New Zealand are separate." And for New Zealand, that was kind of enough, because people would call me and just say, "Are we involved in this? No, we're not. Okay, can you give me something official? No, not yet. Okay, please give me one as soon as you can." But this is where I guess my journey started to change from my peers, as the other countries had a lot more assurance activities. My manager for the next 3 months after this, I think he had 282 client meetings in 3 months during the work side of things, so I kind of lost track with him, because he was looking after Australia, I'm in New Zealand. There's only 2 of us to cover the region at this time. Whereas for me, what happened was transformation activities begin, where 2 to 3 weeks after the breach announcement, there was a global company-wide communication saying, "Right, we've got this big body of work, we need you to help scope this." Okay, but for that to occur, because we're a global company, you had the main side of things in Atlanta, which was pretty much just being told what to do by the US government, various regulations and compliance bodies over there, saying, "Right, here's these number of streams," which I think got up to 28, and then they would communicate it to Australia and New Zealand, and you're expected to kind of toe the line and prioritize what's going on. Now, I was in an office of 60 people. Of those 60 people, I had 2 development teams at the time. Those 2 development teams were on required compliance activities for New Zealand. We couldn't stop to do that. So the security remediation team became me. I was it. I was promised contractors that would start up soon, but because we were still going through merging activities, we had all these people lined up to start in December. Instead, what happened is that, "Oh, you can't use those agencies anymore. Here's a new one," which meant that I didn't get my resource until April, which meant for me, for 6 months, I was pretty much on this project along with the head of QA and the head of solutions architecture for New Zealand. So there's 3 people trying to work out how to attack all these complex problems. So I stopped being a consultant and more back into operational activities. Over this period, I was BA, solutions architect, PM, help desk, just anything that needed done that would come to me. And that kind of put me in a weird position, because I was now the focal point for all of these activities going on around New Zealand, reporting to Australia that went back to the States, right? This big, long, giant reporting chain. And so what would happen is that my name would be just dropped into everything. So I'd be getting emails and phone calls and things all throughout the day, because I was the main contact point, which meant my day at this time started like this, and this is how it was for a good 9 to 12 months from memory. I'd kind of wake up at 6, I'd see what had come through from the US, because if something had changed overnight in the scope of the project across any stream, I knew today I was going to have to fix something or work with the team to do that. I'd get into the New Zealand office. From there, I'd have about 2 hours to myself to figure out plan of attack for the day and what was going on. And then from there, Australia would come online around 11, and they'd suddenly have a whole bunch of more information. So any plans I'd made during that first 5 hours were now changed. Priorities have changed. No, please don't do that. You're doing this now. I've got this. Doesn't matter. Go on to this. Then from there, I'd work on that till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Then I'd go home. I'd done my bit. But then you'd get the end-of-day messages from people saying, "Oh, hang on, I don't have this information. I need this now. We need to report this. This is going in a report, blah, 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 blah. It's needed next day at Congress," like all this type of reporting information, which I'd then have to bug the New Zealand team to find information on. Now, one of the core pieces was that the infrastructure side of things was managed out of Australia. And I can tell you now, if anyone here is supported from a team in Australia and a breach happens, they're looking after their own. Do not for a second think that because you've got an SLA, that they'll look after your company in the time of a breach, because all resources are just being chucked over there. It was a really trying period, and essentially I'd have to lean on all the political capital, any friendships or anything to get done out of the Australian team, because they were wrapped up in Australia. Everything else I had to kind of do by myself in New Zealand with an outsourcer, and there was only so much I was able to do during that time. So that brings me on to these slides, which is just some, when you're, I'll call it in a post-breach world, security is very different, because it's no longer, here's our strategy, here's our long-term goal, we want to do this in 3 and 4 years. It's now, hi, we've got 8 months to implement an array of controls that are very complex. Let's go do this. And you're no longer a technology function. For me, it felt more like a product. And the product you're trying to get out is security, and your customer is regulators and compliance authorities. And the cost of doing that is not loss of sales or anything like that. It is huge fines and potentially going out of business. That's a completely different environment to work in. And if you're in a multinational company and you're doing all these type of activities, make sure all your territories are on the same, using the same project methodology. Because what will also happen at this time is that we transitioned from good old waterfall projects to agile, agile safe. And I thought, okay, this was going on worldwide. So there was a period of 6 months where I also became an agile coach, scrum master, because of the fact that I'd get this list of 28 different activities, and I had to prioritize it, put them in sprints, all of that, estimates, do all of those things, because that's what we were using down here in Australia and New Zealand. And when we were reporting back to the States, it just didn't feel right. Be like, why aren't you doing this? Where's this priority? Why aren't you doing all of this in parallel? But I later found out, like a year later, that they were still using waterfall methodology. So if you're reporting on agile to an area which is using waterfall, you've got a massive lot of communication, massive loss of communication, and that just makes things harder. Which is why, carrying on with my day, you know, I'd go to bed 10, 11 o'clock at night with the phone at the side of my bed, and then, you know, at the time I had my daughter was 4 years old, so she'd be waking up at night. So I'd wake up to put her back to bed, and end up spending up 2 or 3 hours while she's asleep, responding to changes and things going on, trying to figure out what's going on, to whatever contractors picked up the ball, whatever PM's hassling me, just trying to find information so I can be prepared when I wake up in like an hour or two, that I know what the next steps were the next day. And what works in your country or territory may not work in another. Fight for what you know is right by your people. One of the biggest challenges which I had is that New Zealand is pretty unique in the fact that there's no local cloud presence in New Zealand, it's all in Australia. And with that comes all types of data sovereignty issues. So when you're looking for moving things to the cloud as a pattern in a global company, cool, that works in every other territory because they either don't have any data sovereignty or they're hosted in country. But with New Zealand, it's tricky. Because if you want to take advantage of AWS, Azure, or GCP, you're moving stuff to Australia. And there are specific contracts and clauses and regulations which require certain amounts of data to stay in New Zealand. And it was kind of funny from the fact that here I am, I'm down in this little corner of the world, 2 reporting layers deep to the States, and I'm the one kicking up the fuss about moving data anywhere offshore. I'm like, cool, that's a global pattern, doesn't work for us. Can you please support us in other ways? And the biggest fights I had wasn't with other parts of the business, it was with the security team saying, why can't we use this pattern? Why can't we use this pattern? Why can't we deploy? Why won't you just do this? Can we do something like just put it in there and ask for forgiveness later? And I just had none of that. Not having any type of thing happen on my watch to New Zealand data, just so things can get fixed, right? Because I was comfortable with the environment, I still am, no need to change it. So there's that side of things, and then post-breach business incident response personal. The people with the most knowledge in your organization that you rely on the most, the 1 to 2 people that know everything about the company, have been there from day dot, they are the ones that suffer the most. They are the one that's pulled in every direction. Imagine having 28 different project streams come to you for information because they need to fill out their spreadsheet, their form, anything like that, in order to get things moving. Though that person becomes squeezed, they're going to become unhappy. I'm unhappy because that person's unhappy, and it just ends up in a giant pit of despair because you see them being hammered, they're being hammered along with you by all these other 28 different project teams and whoever's on deck that day, and it's tough. It's very tough. because I liken the situation I was in to if you think about a project that's going live, a big project, and you've got those 3 or 4 days where it's very intense, everyone's on board, everyone's fighting to get it done, fixing any issues. Imagine doing that for over a year and the toll that would take on anyone inside your organization, let alone a company of 60 people, where only probably 20, I think it was 20 to 30 were IT staff, right? That is a massive toll mentally and physically. You can't fake who you are under stress. Now, I mentioned this in my PurpleCon talk, where you know who you are, and if you're trying to put up some type of front or be something you're not, when you're in one of these situations, you're going to be found out, because if you're doing this for a year, something's going to give. So this is where I found out that empathy is my biggest strength. I may not be the brightest technically, but I know exactly what's going inside the business, how people are feeling, how I can get them to work. I just need to protect them from what's going on so they've got the confidence and the time to do what they're paid to do. And your mental health will deteriorate. This job broke me. I've got no shame in saying that. This broke me, and this broke other members of my team. I know of 2 people that got hospitalized for stress and anxiety and exhaustion. There are a number of people who missed family events, holidays, school events, anything and everything, because something needed to be done. I'm pretty sure the team in the States worked 18-hour days, 6 days a week for this whole period, because I'd come on Monday morning. There's a whole team working Sunday night, sort of like midnight in Atlanta, right? And that's the hidden cost, the mental health of people that are working on this project that's hidden. They're hidden behind the vendor success stories, the hi, we did this, and look, this is amazing. It's hidden behind stock price. It's hidden behind we spent this amount on security, because the real cost is to the people. Now, this became apparent to me because after a year of doing this, going back to Atlanta, and my whole team was still there. No one had left, apart from one team who managed to all get transferred to like a certain place a year afterwards in Argentina. But I'd been there for a year. I was absolutely empty, and I had the opportunity after Atlanta to go on holiday with my family for a month in Greece and the UK. This picture is me with my daughter at the Olympic swimming pool in London. Now, I used to love taking her swimming, and this is the first time I've done it in years. And kids that you know when something's up, because this photo was taken just after she told me, "Daddy, I miss you, take me swimming." And that's because while I was involved in all of this work, I wasn't present emotionally or mentally. I was there, but I wasn't. My mind was elsewhere. All my energy, all my emotional energy had gone into the people I'm working with to make sure that they were protected, that they had the space to do their things, that I felt, well, yeah, to me it felt as though I left my family down and my daughter down. So, thanks to Equifax for an experience no training cert or anything can ever buy, and thank you for listening.